from my colleagues.
Any other questions? Ms. Patel.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the presentation, and thank you to all the speakers. I know it's relatively late, so thanks for sticking around. Just a couple of questions, and this comes out of some of the things that were mentioned. I'll just initially follow up with a question around the fire trucks going through the roundabouts. I know, Chief, you mentioned that there's a truck apron and it can drive over the top of the roundabout if necessary. So I'm assuming that's only something that a fire truck can do. It wouldn't be something that a normal vehicle would be able to just drive over.
I would hope that the only vehicle that would drive over that would be the fire truck, but as far as the ability for it to be done, I'll defer to Tom Frank.
Thank you, Chief. So the roundabouts are also designed to accommodate other rather large trucks. So the California legal limit is about, they call it a wheelbase, like the wheelbase length, and it's about a 65-foot long truck. And now, if you want to visualize it, it would look like a furniture moving truck. And so we do design our roundabouts to facilitate those large vehicles crossing over it, and they do utilize the truck apron. The truck apron, as you see, it's typically about 3 or 4 inches higher than the surrounding pavement. So what that does is it dissuades other vehicles from using that truck apron, and that's why you get the horizontal deflection, which slows down most traffic.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. And then in terms of and I know this question was asked, but just to confirm, because this is something that you have presented prior to this presentation as well, and we heard this from some speakers as well, that when we reduce speeds, there's a greater likelihood of surviving if somebody is struck in a collision.
That's correct.
Okay. And then one of the speakers had brought up, is there a way that we could potentially utilize our education campaign to educate folks on proper use of a roundabout, where it could include an indicator on the, where you have to yield? Is that something that has been done in other jurisdictions or other roundabouts? And if so, is that something that we could utilize as well?
There's a lot of public information out there regarding roundabouts. We have, as I mentioned, I think I use the adjective too often, but an amazing communications team that we work with. So yes, they will be providing ongoing public education information in regards to roundabouts as they become more popular in town. One thing I've noticed, and while we have this opportunity, we're talking about them, when you approach a roundabout, be sure to use your turn signals just like you would any intersection. So if you're going left, when you're approaching a single lane roundabout, use the left-hand turn signal. It really helps the other users of the roundabout know where you're going, and it really helps provides less frustration in a roundabout.
Okay, thank you. And a couple other questions that I have around pedestrian safety. I know that was something that was mentioned quite a bit, and something around how do we indicate that there are folks that are crossing. It sounds like there would be, at least from what I've seen in other areas, that there would be some sort of blinking lights or something to indicate that there is a pedestrian that's walking through that.
It's something we could consider when we bring it from the conceptual design to final design. At State Street, we don't have the rapid flash beacons, and at many roundabouts are not necessary. Where you really get the safer pedestrian crossings, as you saw in the Bird Rock videos, and you actually can experience that, of course, our State Street roundabout, is you have a more personal connection with the drivers. So you actually get eye contact, and I'd advise, and people don't feel inherently safe to jump out in front of a moving car, but what happens is when you're indicating that you're going to be crossing in the crosswalk and you get that eye contact, the driver will see you and slow down and give the pedestrian, yield to the pedestrian, and that's how they cross that 12 to 20 foot distance, and that's what makes it so much safer. So to answer your question, we'll consider the additional rapid flash beacons, but right now they're not included in our plan.
Okay. The reason why I bring it up is I know that's just another way or another indicator for folks to know that that's happening. I know that on the boulevard, whether I've walked it, driven it, I think that's always been a more helpful way to know that somebody's crossing, because sometimes people don't see somebody crossing, right? And so I think just wanted to mention that from personal experience. The other piece that I was curious about, I know folks mentioned that, we're reducing it down from a significant number of lanes down to this configuration that we have. In terms of data that shows congestion, and I think there was like gridlock that was mentioned, does that tend to happen with areas that have roundabouts, or do we see that? And maybe this isn't a great comparison, but does that happen more frequently when we do have a traffic signal versus a roundabout? I'd be curious to hear if you have that information.
Yeah, we do have that information. And if you remember, several months ago, we had State Route 78 closed, and we had a lot of congestion in town because of that. We had gridlock conditions. So I took that opportunity to check regional traffic flow along our arterial network and our collector streets. And what I saw is, and it was replicated not just in our city, but other coastal cities, is that the intersections with traffic signals was where the congestion was. And that's what we have today. And so whenever I could tell you the times, and we all live it, Saturday mornings in the summer, like we are right now, southbound coming from Orange County, it's going to be gridlock. And we're going to get pretty much peak traffic volumes going down our Carlsbad Boulevard, the old Pacific Coast Highway, all the way through, because I-5 gets gridlocked. And so, yeah, what we see is more congestion at the traffic signals and less congestion at the roundabouts, like at State Street.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. I just have comments. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I actually do have one more. I just thought
A graphic that we pulled together that shows an automation of the roundabout working. And what I'd like to highlight is this pedestrian in green, actually, and then you just see a bicyclist that took into that shared pathway right behind him. He's of course going slow because it's appropriate. And here's what's happening. We have 2,000 to 4,000 pedestrians walking along this coastline in this alignment. And what I really want to highlight is with the roundabout option, when they're crossing, all of the other traffic motions continue. And so that's where the efficiency of the single lane roundabout excels. Like, everything's continuing to operate. There could be thousands of pedestrians crossing this intersection, and you'll still have movement of the vehicles through the intersection. And so that's when you see people, and it's not like inherently natural to think like, if you're taking 5, and when I saw that graphic that was presented, it was actually 3 vehicular traffic lanes in the southbound direction, and then you have to add 2 more in the northbound. So you actually have 7 vehicular traffic lanes at the intersection. And how can possibly 1 lane in each direction be greater capacity than the 5 lanes? Excuse me, it's not 7. No, it is 7. And the answer is that the capacity is limited by the efficiency and the capacity of the intersection itself. And so the roundabout intersection processes more vehicular traffic flow than the traffic signals for 2 lanes in each direction traffic signal. With the traffic signal, because what we have included in the very thick traffic study, which was mentioned, it is rather thick, but the traffic signal option would actually create additional delay beyond what is experienced today. And the reason why is because currently there is no pedestrian heads on the western side of the roadway. So as I mentioned, there's no access through there, and you're familiar with it, but there's no push buttons. So if we go with the traffic signal option, we're actually going to have pedestrian push buttons for the southern side of the intersection as well as the western side. So that's going to cause additional delay that's not experienced today. So when you look at the options, the roundabout with the heavy traffic volume on the west side with continuous vehicle volumes traveling through that compared to the increased congestion with the traffic signal option, it would be a dramatic difference.
To traffic and mobility twice.
That's
First
correct.
time they marinated on it, weren't sure. Help me if this is my recollection. And then second time it came out as a unanimous support for the roundabout.
Yes, that's correct. And the first time it went to the Traffic and Mobility Commission, there was actually two new commissioners, and they weren't quite familiar with the current city policy, what's included in our general plan and our mobility element. And I because of that, I actually brought them in and brought them up to speed with what our current policy is. So I take some ownership of that. They got kind of thrown into a hot one right away without knowing what was included in our mobility element. So then they elected to actually bring it back. They did not make a recommendation to City Council the first time, and they did realize that they are an advisory board, and their responsibility is to bring to you recommendations. So they agendized it again. The second time they reviewed it, they did have a unanimous decision
Thank you.
in support of the roundabout option.
Anybody have any comments?
Okay, thank you, and thanks for the presentation, and thank you again to the community for writing in and showing up today. I know this is something that we've been discussing for quite some time, and I know to our staff for all the robust communication with the community and outreach. We received, a lot of different communications, and I feel like we had some folks, just like today, we had some folks who are very much for the roundabout, others that believe it should be, just a traffic signal like it is today. Just based on the data and what I've seen, and obviously what I've heard, and especially from those that utilize different modes of transit, besides just a car, to me, the roundabout sounds like the best option based on the information and data presented to us. The biggest reason being the safety of all people that are traveling there, not just the cars, right? It's about the folks that are recreating, that are walking, that are biking. And as we've seen, especially with our traffic emergency and the education, engineering, enforcement that we've done, we've had a great and robust communication, but that doesn't take away the human element and the human error that can still occur, especially at high speeds. And I think that's the part, as a mom, as somebody who does drive, walk, bike, I do all of those. I actually walk from South Carlsbad up to North Carlsbad sometimes with my family, so I'm very, very familiar with the different amenities that we have across our coast. And I think that one of the things that we could benefit from are lower speeds, is making sure that we have lower speeds, especially in that area. I heard from some folks personal stories about how people have just ran red lights, and I see that on a daily basis just walking around, because people do that. And so I think that's something that I just want to emphasize and mention, that from that element, I think it's really important. I think definitely from a mobility standpoint, whether just being able to have that constant flow of traffic, I think that's another piece that's really important. Sounds like the cost analysis also that you shared said that it would be about $500,000 less. And then the other piece is, again, that this, from a sustainable mobility plan, looking at that too. I know you all had mentioned that here. It's not just about that, but that's another great element added on from the piece of just reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, again, increasing those multimodal levels of transit, and having the ability to ensure that folks across our city have different modes of transit that they can utilize and have the ability to enjoy in this beautiful city we call home. So that would be it. And thanks again to those that were able to join us today.
Ms. Acosta.
Thank you. I know that we're going down the line. I really do want to hear from Councilmember Burkholder and her comments, because this is in her district. And I do think that as district representatives, we know the areas that we live in the very best. I know this intersection because I visit the beach there, but I also know Poncho better because that's in my district and that's near my home. I'm conflicted. I do support roundabouts. I've said that many times, and I voted for other roundabouts. But I also know that there's a lot of questions, and there's a lot of fear about what if we put this in here and it causes more problems and is not as good as we hope that it is. And I would really like to hear Councilmember Burkholder and the rest of the council before making a final decision. Thank you.
Ms. Burkholder.
Defer to my colleagues before I make my final comments. Thank you.
Ms. Luna.
Sure. First of all, I'm in that 15%, and we rock. I walk that probably 5 times a week. I used to live in District 1. I'm intimately familiar with that, and anything is better than what we have. Anecdotally, my walker friends and that, the flashing lights do not work. They do not care for them. They're very concerned for their safety. I usually side on with the subject matter experts. Mr. Frank is an engineer, and one of the other woman that testified on she's on the Traffic and Mobility Commission. She is an engineer, and the gentleman's wife, albeit an electrical engineer. The other folks, I think, did great data mining. I don't know that they are necessarily subject matter experts, but I know they're great data miners, and I support roundabouts in the right place. I don't know if this is the right place. However, it seems like there are some remedies if it's put in and it doesn't pan out. I like a beta test. I would love to have a beta test out there, have the roundabout, a mock roundabout of some sort where we don't invest all that money, and let's see how it works. That would be my option 3 preference, is let's see if all these naysayers, it's true, or conversely, the residents that live there, if they actually see their quality of life be better. I don't know, but normally in these type of situations, I will go ahead and side with the subject matter experts. But as long as I know that there's some remedial action out there, if this does not work, one of my concerns is that this is it. It's not segmented. I mean, we have intersections down the rest of the coast, so we're going to have a roundabout, and then you come up to an intersection, and then you come up into an intersection, and you come up into an intersection. I would feel more comfortable if it was all roundabouts down through our city. So those are my comments.
I've read the emails and listened to people talk everywhere in the city. I think this conversation briefly surpassed the conversation of homelessness. It doesn't matter what we decide today. Half the residents are going to be pleased. Half the residents are going to be disappointed. It's no secret that I'm very critical of roundabouts. I'm kind of a traditionalist. Mr. Frank, you did talk me into a couple of roundabouts a little bit further south on Carlsbad Boulevard. I came in with the idea that I would say no, that I'm having a hard time with the roundabouts. But your arguments are very good, and the arguments from some of the residents were very good. And you kind of brought me up to this 50-50 mark. But I'm going to echo what Ms. Luna was just saying. I felt okay saying yes, hesitantly, to some of the roundabouts further south on the Carlsbad Boulevard. But this particular intersection, I wrote down just some notes. We're going to hit tourists, pedestrians, cars, bikes, e-bikes, skateboards, people lost, people looking at the folks walking around in their swimsuits. This is going to be very distracting, and I just can't bring myself to supporting it. I will tell you, I'm very close to 50-50, but tonight I'm going to vote no on this. So, Ms. Burkholder, are you ready?
Okay, well, I wanted to sort of get a feel from every.
Thank you. I think I was similar to you. I'm at 50%, but rather than you, Mayor, I went from super pro roundabout to, oh, I'm concerned, versus not really for roundabouts, but maybe convinced. So I think the concern with this particular intersection is that the congestion and connection of all those folks at once on bikes, and as you said, the looky-loos and the drivers and the people lugging their beach chairs across the street and their camping gear and their wagons and things. So I am concerned. I would like to see, I know we have to make change. This intersection is not great as it is. So since we have concerns about the roundabout, I'm wondering, as we're having this discussion, how people are feeling about the option 2, the traffic signal, or something that's maybe a hybrid. I heard Councilmember Luna mention some kind of pilot, if that's even a potential, to ask staff to come back with some kind of temporary kind of pilot program. I'm not sure what the options are.
And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tom. Tom, are you familiar with any instances in which they've been able to do a pilot roundabout that's safe?
I am familiar with pilot roundabout projects, and what I would suggest to council is we do actually have a roundabout that's well into design. We're at the 90% design level at the Terramar Improvement Project, so that roundabout is planned for Cannon Road and Carlsbad Boulevard. That roundabout is well ahead of this roundabout, so it's going to be constructed first. It's going to be just down the road to the south, and we're going to experience many of the same traffic volumes, bicycle volumes. Granted, there's not a beach access just to the west of that location, but there is one nearby at Terramar. So what I would suggest is to reconsider what your options are, and then also we can evaluate how that Cannon Road roundabout is performing, and if it's performing well, and you do select the roundabout option, then we're okay. If we notice some issues or some concerns, we can reevaluate and assess what those issues are, and then bring back the issues we're experiencing at Cannon Road to council, specifically at Tamarack, and we could address what the options what the issues are, what the options look like, and what our recommendations would be for council's consideration to address the issue of an interim type of roundabout. That it really doesn't work because you don't get the benefits of a modern day roundabout. What you get is delineation. You don't get people truly slowing down. We've seen some haphazard installations of temporary traffic circles. I won't even call them roundabouts because it's an insult. And I didn't want to mention locations, but we hear from them from the public. So I would strongly recommend against an interim roundabout condition, but I would recommend that we look at how the Cannon Road roundabout is performing and then adjust based on the performance of what we're seeing at the Cannon Road.
Ms. Patel.
Yeah, it sounds like our council sounds torn on this, and just based on the recommendation that you just made, Mr. Frank, in terms of, and I know Councilmember Luna, you mentioned, if there's a way, and Councilmember Burkholder, you also mentioned if there's a way for us to have the ability to look at some data, have the ability to then make that decision whether or not we'd want to continue to move forward based on the performance of that. I personally think that's a great option. At least it's a compromise, right? In terms of, okay, let's at least start to move forward in some direction. And so if I'd make that motion to,
I would like to add to that.
okay. So we move forward with option 1 with the suggestions that staff just made.
And okay.
We don't have a beach at Cannon. We don't have bathrooms. We don't have a lower Tamarack parking lot. I'm not comfortable with this, so I'll be voting no because I still like the idea of option number 2. So we have a motion and a second. Please vote. It passes 3-2.